I heard the trees whisper that night. They were angry. And I knew why. But it was too late. I had already dug the hole. The cold, wet soil clung to my hands like guilt I couldn't wash away. The shovel hit something hard. Not a root. Not a rock. Something else. My heart stopped. 3 weeks earlier, I didn't give a damn about nature. Trees? Dirt? Birds? Who cares? I was too busy chasing deadlines and pouring coffee into my bloodstream to stay awake. I lived in a glass box downtown with 0 plants and a view of a concrete wall. That was life. Real life. Nature was just some fantasy for campers and hippies. But then Daisy died. She was my dog. My only real friend. And suddenly, I needed somewhere real to say goodbye. So I drove 3 hours north to Black Hollow Forest, a place I hadn't been to since I was a kid. My grandpa used to take me there. He used to say, "This land remembers. You treat it kind, it'll treat you kinder." I didn't believe in that crap back then. Still didn't. Until I started digging. It was pitch black. No stars. No moon. Just me, the sound of shoveling, and the strange feeling that I was being watched. Like the whole forest had eyes. I shook it off. "I'm just tired," I whispered. "Just grief." But when my shovel hit that hard object in the ground, not stone, not wood, something else, I felt it. Like the earth had just flinched. I leaned down. My fingers brushed against it. It was cold. Metallic. Sharp edges. I pulled it out. It was a small, rusted box. Old. Locked. Covered in strange symbols. I should have left it there. I should have buried Daisy and gone home. But I didn't. I opened it. Inside was a single folded note. One word, written in faded black ink. Return. That's when the wind stopped. The air froze. And every tree around me started creaking like bones waking up after centuries of silence. I dropped the box. I grabbed Daisy's body and ran. But the path back was gone. Gone. Vanished. Just trees. Miles and miles of trees where the road used to be. I screamed. No one answered. The forest had swallowed me whole. And that was just the beginning. I ran until my lungs gave out. Branches clawed at my face. Roots grabbed my feet. The ground shifted like it was alive. Like it didn't want me to leave. I pulled out my phone. No signal. No Wi-Fi. No bars. No GPS. Just a black screen and my own reflection, wide eyes, blood on my cheek, and something else behind me. A shadow. Tall. Still. Watching. I spun around. Nothing. Just trees. But they weren't in the same place. I swear they weren't. The ones with the twisted bark and the split branches, they had been on my left before. Now they were behind me. Or above me. Was I going in circles? I tried the compass app. It spun. Like it didn't know where north was anymore. Like the forest had eaten direction itself. I screamed again. Louder. Desperate. Cursing the wind, the trees, the stupid idea of burying Daisy here. But no one came. No echo. Just silence. I dropped to my knees. "What do you want from me?" That's when I noticed it. My backpack, the one I tossed behind me while digging, was gone. So was Daisy's body. I started shaking. No, and oh. I turned around. And there she was. Daisy. Not moving. Not breathing. But sitting upright. Right under a massive, gnarled oak tree I hadn't seen before. And beside her, the box. The rusted box I had thrown. It was open again. The note inside had changed. New words. "You take. You pay." I backed away. I didn't take anything. Liar. I took the box. I disturbed something. And the forest was calling me on it. That's when the wind picked up again. But it didn't sound like wind anymore. It sounded like voices. Thousands of them. Whispers. Laughing. Crying. Begging. I covered my ears, but they were inside my head. "You never cared. You paved us over. You cut us down. You poisoned us. You killed us." "No," I whimpered. "I didn't." "You looked away." That one hit like a blade. Because it was true. I had looked away. From the wildfires. The dying oceans. The animals going extinct. The trees being turned into parking lots. I had looked away. And now nature was staring back. I ran again. Didn't know where. Didn't care. I just needed to get away from that tree, that box, those voices. But no matter how far I went, the whispers followed. Like smoke in my lungs. Like regret in my blood. My boots slipped in the mud as I pushed deeper into the forest, branches tearing my jacket, the cold slicing through me. My breath came out in white gasps. Then I tripped. Hard. My face slammed into wet moss and leaves, and I felt it, the movement underneath me. Something squirmed. I scrambled back, heart hammering, and saw them. Roots. Long black. Pulsing. Crawling through the earth like veins looking for a heartbeat. They were reaching. For me. I stood up and ran, but the roots followed. Bursting through the ground like snakes, lashing at my feet. One wrapped around my ankle. I screamed. It yanked. I hit the ground again and clawed at the dirt, kicking, thrashing. I grabbed a sharp rock and smashed the root again and again until it let go. Then silence. Except for the sound of my own sobbing. I was losing it. This was madness. A bad dream. I told myself that over and over. But dreams don't bleed. I looked down at my leg. Blood soaked through my jeans. The root had broken skin deep. And just beneath the wound, something was moving. Under my skin. Like a small black thread had been left behind. I started shaking uncontrollably. I need to get out. I need to get out now. Then I saw something up ahead. A cabin. Hidden between the trees like it didn't want to be found. Old. Half swallowed by ivy and fog. But real. Smoke curled from the chimney. Someone was there. Someone human. I limped toward it, dragging my injured leg, ignoring the whispers that now hissed my name. When I reached the front door, I didn't knock. I slammed it open. And froze. There were no lights. Just candles. Hundreds of them. And in the center of the room stood a woman. Old. Barefoot. Eyes like moss. Skin like tree bark. She didn't speak. She just looked at me. And said with a voice older than bone. You broke the pact. I stood there panting. Bleeding. Shaking. The old woman didn't move. Didn't blink. But she knew me. She said my name. Ethan, she whispered. The one who turned his back. How do you know who I am? Her lips curled into a sad smile. I remember when you were a boy. You came here with your grandfather. You planted a tree. I felt cold wash over me. That memory, buried deep, flooded back like a wave breaking through a dam. I was 8. My grandpa handed me a tiny sapling and told me, we plant, we protect. Always. We buried it together. Right in the heart of Black Hollow. But I never came back. Not until now. You forgot, she said. You forgot the promise. I didn't know, I didn't mean to. She raised a hand and my voice died in my throat. The air thickened. My lungs locked. Like the very forest had pressed a hand against my chest. No more excuses, she whispered. You came here to bury your friend. But you dug into something older than pain. Older than death. She pointed at my leg. You've already been marked. I looked down. The black thread under my skin, it had spread. Thin lines like vines crawled up my thigh. What is it? The Earth's memory, she said. It's inside you now. Feeding. Testing. I stumbled backward. No, I didn't ask for this. She nodded. But you earned it. Then she turned and walked to a shelf covered in dried herbs and jars filled with things I didn't want to name. From a dusty drawer, she pulled out a small leather pouch. She tossed it to me. Inside were leaves. Crushed bones. A sliver of stone. Take this. Burn it. Before the sun rises. Or you'll be part of this place. Forever. I stared at her, desperate. What happens if I don't? She stepped close. Close enough that I could see the forest inside her eyes. You'll vanish. Like the others. No body. No trace. Just another whisper in the trees. My heart froze. Others? She nodded once. Then she opened the back door of the cabin. The wind howled through. And I saw them. Shoes. Hundreds of them. Boots. Sneakers. Sandals. All half buried in the moss outside. Every pair once belonged to someone who came here. And never left. I stumbled back from the doorway, nearly dropping the pouch. My throat went dry. My legs weak. All those shoes. So many. Different sizes. Styles. Years of rot and mold clinging to them like ghosts. Some were half covered in moss. Others had been completely swallowed by the ground, just the tips showing like the forest had eaten them. I turned to the woman, eyes wide. What happened to them? She didn't answer right away. She just looked past me. Through me. As if watching something I couldn't see. They forgot, she said finally. Just like you. Forgot what? She walked back to the fire, her voice like whine through broken branches. That this land is alive. That it listens. That it remembers. My skin prickled. You said I have to burn this. I held up the pouch before sunrise. Why? What does it do? It buys you mercy. From what? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to me slowly and whispered. From yourself. That didn't make sense. None of this did. But I didn't argue. Because I could feel it, the thing growing inside my leg. The blackness. Spreading. Pulsing with every heartbeat like it wanted more of me. I needed fire. I needed out. Where do I burn it? I asked. Her eyes flicked to the back of the cabin. There's a stone circle. Old. Sacred. Go there. Do not step outside the ring. I turned to leave. One more thing, she said. If you hear the voices call your name again, don't answer. No matter what they say. I paused. Why? She looked at me with a sadness that cracked something deep inside me. Because it won't be them talking. The forest was worse now. Darker. Colder. The trees felt tighter. Like they'd moved even closer together, breathing on me. I followed the woman's instructions, pushing through tangled roots and branches until I saw it. A clearing. Dead center, the stone circle. 12 jagged rocks forming a ring around scorched earth. The trees around it were bare. Dead. Like even they feared this place. I stepped inside. And I felt it instantly. Pressure. Like walking into water. The whispers stopped. The black veins in my leg pulsed slower. I fell to my knees, pulled the pouch from my jacket and emptied it into the middle of the ring. Then I struck a match. The flame caught. Orange. Red. Then blue. It rose like a column, silent, straight into the sky. I watched breathless. Then I heard it. My grandfather's voice. Ethan, it's okay. You can come out now. You're safe. My blood went ice. I looked around. No one. Just the trees. Ethan, please. I'm cold. I need you. It sounded exactly like him. But he'd been dead for 15 years. I remembered the woman's warning. Don't answer. But my throat ached. Tears welled up. Then it spoke again. This time with my voice. Begging. Crying. Screaming. Let me out. I pressed my hands to my ears and stared at the fire. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I didn't break the ring. And then it screamed. Something inside the trees. Something that had my voice, my face, my fear twisted into something else. Something wild. It shrieked like it was burning. And then, silence. The fire burned out in an instant. One blink flames. The next black ash. And silence so deep it rang in my ears like a scream I couldn't hear. I sat there, frozen in the circle, the scent of scorched earth filling my lungs, my heartbeat pounding louder than the forest ever had. Then I looked down. The veins on my leg gone. No black lines. No crawling under the skin. Just raw, red flesh where the root had latched onto me. It worked. The ritual worked. I stood up slowly, testing my weight. I still limped, but the burning pain was gone. Just numbness. Like my leg didn't fully belong to me anymore. I stepped to the edge of the circle. The wind moved again. But softer now. Like it was watching me, not hunting. And the trees, they weren't whispering anymore. They were listening. I walked back to the cabin, clutching the empty pouch. Everything felt different now. Calmer. But also heavier. Like the forest wasn't done with me. The woman was gone when I returned. The candles had burned low. Her chair was empty. The air inside smelled like cedar and ash. But she left me something. A notebook. Old. Bound in leather. Resting on the table where she'd been sitting. On the first page, in crooked handwriting. For those who forget. I flipped through it. Page after page filled with names, dates, and what they'd taken from the forest. One man had stolen a bear cub. Another had cut down sacred trees. A woman poisoned a stream. Every one of them had vanished. No bodies. Just shoes in the moss. And at the very back, the most recent entry. Ethan Caldwell. Opened the box. Broke the silence. But underneath, someone had added something new. Returned the fire. Paid the debt. That's when I noticed the last page had something stitched into the leather. A tiny seed. Wrapped in dried leaves. My heart stopped. It was the same kind of tree my grandfather and I had planted years ago. A sprout from that same life. I didn't know what to do at first. But somehow, I did. I walked back to the place where I had tried to bury Daisy. The ground was still soft. Still unsettled. But she wasn't there. Her body was gone. In its place was a small mound of dirt, and from it a green shoot was already growing. Alive. Strong. I knelt beside it. And I planted the seed. No prayer. No ritual. Just my hands in the soil. Warm. Steady. Honest. And for the first time in days, maybe years, I felt something crack open inside me. Gratitude. Not the fake kind. The real kind. The kind that hurts because it's so pure. And in that moment, the forest breathed. And it let me go. The next morning, I found the road again. Just like that, where it had vanished before, it was suddenly there. Asphalt cracked but solid, stretching between the trees like nothing had ever changed. My car sat where I'd left it. Untouched. Clean. Like none of it happened. I got in, turned the key, and the engine purred to life like it was waiting for me. As I drove away, I didn't look back. Couldn't. I didn't want to see the trees moving again. Didn't want to see her standing in the fog. Didn't want to feel the forest wrap itself around me like it had done once before. But even as the miles fell away behind me, something stayed with me. Not fear. Not even guilt. It was a presence. Like the woods had left fingerprints on my soul. I got home late that night. My apartment looked smaller somehow. Colder. I stepped inside, shut the door, and locked it out of habit even though I knew now locks didn't matter. Not with what I'd seen. I threw my dirty clothes into the trash, washed my skin raw in the shower, and sat on the floor of my living room with a beer and silence. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just stared at the wall, remembering the way my name sounded in the trees. The next morning, my legs started to itch. I rolled up my jeans and checked. Still no veins. No blackness. But under the skin, just above my ankle, I felt a bump. Small. Hard. Like a splinter. I got a needle and tried to dig it out. But it wasn't wood. It was stone. I dropped the needle and stared at my leg in horror. It was gray. Just a patch no bigger than a coin. But it was rough. And cold. Like bark. Over the next week, I tried to forget. I deleted every photo I had of Daisy. Tossed her leash, her toys, her bed. It felt like betrayal, but I couldn't handle the memories. Not when they came with roots and whispers and ash. I even threw away the notebook. Burned it in the fireplace. But the dreams kept coming. Every night. I'd wake up to the sound of leaves rustling. Not outside. Inside. In my room. In my closet. In my lungs. And in every dream I was back in the circle. But the fire didn't burn. It just sat there, cold and black. And in the middle of the stones stood a man. Tall. Hollow-eyed. With my face. But no mouth. Just vines growing from where it should be. Every night, he stepped closer. And closer. Until I woke up screaming. The patch on my leg grew. Now it covered my shin. The bark was spreading. And I was starting to hear whispers again. Only this time, they weren't angry. They were welcoming. Come back. Come home. You belong to us now. I went to a doctor. Didn't tell him everything, obviously, just that something weird was happening to my skin. He looked at my leg. Frowned. Scraped it. Then scraped deeper. Until he hit something that made his eyes go wide. He stepped back like I just pulled a gun on him. What the hell is that? He muttered. I looked down. Where he scraped, something was poking through. Not blood. Not skin. Wood. Fibrous. Dense. Almost alive. He tried to keep calm, said he'd run some tests, but I could see it in his eyes. He didn't want me in his office anymore. I left before they could keep me. Didn't want to be locked in some hospital when the truth came for me in the night. Because by now I knew. This wasn't an infection. This was a transformation. And it was only just beginning. I started isolating. Work? I quit. Friends? Ignored them. Family? I had none left. The only thing I could focus on was not changing. I drank herbal detox teas. Took every antifungal, antibacterial, anti-anything pill I could find online. But it didn't matter. The dreams got worse. And the voice? It stopped whispering. It spoke now. Louder. Clearer. You took from the earth, it said. Now the earth takes from you. I begged. Pleaded. Promised to make things right. But the voice only laughed. There is no right. Only balance. Then one night, I woke up in the woods again. But I hadn't left my apartment. At least, I didn't remember leaving. I was barefoot. Shivering. Standing in front of the same stone circle. And my leg? Was bark. Fully. From the knee down. I dropped to the ground. Screamed until my throat bled. And the forest listened. But this time, it didn't mock me. It welcomed me. A breeze brushed my cheek like a mother's hand. And the trees opened around me, forming a path. Not a trap. Not a maze. A path. I walked it. And with every step, something changed. I could hear the soil breathing. I could feel the moisture under my feet like veins under skin. The trees were no longer strangers. They were family. I was no longer afraid. And that terrified me more than anything. I woke up in my bed again. No memory of getting home. But there was dirt under my nails. Leaves in my sheets. And carved into the skin of my chest, a mark. A spiral. Burned into me like a brand. It bled sap. I stopped looking in mirrors. Every time I did, something new stared back. Eyes a little darker. Pupils wider. Hair thinning, turning coarse like dried grass. But it was my skin that changed the fastest. Not just the bark on my leg. That had spread to my hip now, curling like armor. But my arms, my hands. They were cracking. Thin lines splitting open like dry soil. And beneath them? Green. Tiny threads of it. Moss. Growing inside me. Feeding. Spreading. I tried to tear it off once. ripped a chunk of flesh from my arm in a panic. Blood poured down the sink, but underneath, more moss, deeper now, smiling. I stopped leaving the apartment, stopped answering the door. I could barely speak anymore. My voice was hoarse, brittle like dead leaves. I drank water constantly, trying to stay human. But even it tasted different now, like metal, like roots. Then the birds came. They perched on my windowsill. Every morning, just stared. Not normal birds either. Their eyes glowed. Green. They didn't move when I screamed at them. They just watched. Like they were waiting for something. Then came the knocking. Not the door. The walls. The inside of the walls. Slow at first. Then faster. Rhythmic. Like a heartbeat. Like something was moving through the wood of the building. Crawling. Spreading. Looking for me. And every time I pressed my ear to it, I heard whispers. But not angry ones. Not threats. Instructions. They told me where to dig. Where to open. Where to let it in. And worst of all, they made sense. I didn't resist. Not anymore. I found the notebook again. The one I burned. It was lying on my coffee table, untouched by flame. Clean. Perfect. Waiting. And this time there was a new entry on the last page. No handwriting. Just something scratched deep into the leather with what looked like a claw. Almost home. And under that, a single leaf. Still green. Still alive. Pressed flat and perfect. And shaped exactly like my hand. The night it finally happened, I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I invited it. Because by then, I knew what I was becoming. What I'd always been meant to become. I lit candles all around the apartment. Placed the leaf hand from the notebook on the floor. Drew the spiral on my chest again. Over the scar where it had faded and healed into something darker than skin. And when I whispered the words I didn't remember learning, the air changed. It breathed. The walls groaned. The lights flickered. And then they came. The roots. Through the walls. Through the pipes. Through the floorboards. Slow and deliberate like snakes made of wood and memory. They wrapped around my legs. My arms. My throat. But it didn't choke me. It held me. Gently. Like it was welcoming me back. Like I was the last piece of something ancient. Returning to the place I was always meant to be. I didn't resist. I opened my mouth. And the vines crawled inside. Down my throat. Into my lungs. Into my blood. There was pain. Oh God, there was pain. Like being pulled apart and stitched back together by hands made of thorns. But there was beauty too. Flashes. Visions. I saw everything the forest had seen. Fires burning the old trees. Men drilling, cutting, killing. Lakes drying into cracked bowls. Animals crying out, unheard. And beneath it all silence. A sacred silence. Until me. Until now. Because I was no longer Ethan Caldwell. I was what came after. When I woke, I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was standing. In the clearing. The stone circle. Naked. My skin bark. My hair moss. My heart. No longer beating the way it used to. It beat in rhythm with the earth now. Slow. Heavy. Endless. Around me the forest stood in reverence. Silent. Breathing. And before me a new sapling. Fresh. Green. Growing fast. It had Daisy's eyes. I sank to my knees. Tears fell, but they weren't mine. They belonged to the land. Because I had finally done what no one else would. I had returned. Completely. Willingly. And the forest had accepted my sacrifice. I don't exist in your world anymore. There's no trace of me. No records. No footprints. Just an apartment full of vines and silence. And if you ever find your way to Black Hollow, and the wind starts whispering your name, don't answer. Don't look back. And whatever you do, don't dig. People still come. Hikers. Campers. Lost souls chasing peace in the trees. And I see them. Every single one. They walk through Black Hollow like it's just another forest on the map. They laugh. Take selfies. Leave trash. Break branches. Dig holes. They don't know what lives beneath their feet. What waits. But I do. Because I'm still here. Not like before. Not flesh. Not bone. But something older. something rooted. Sometimes they step too close to the wrong tree. A twisted one, tall, with a spiral scar burned deep into the trunk. My mark. And if they stay long enough, they hear it. A voice. Familiar. Comforting. Calling them deeper. Calling them home. They don't realize that the air is listening. That the moss is watching. That the forest never forgets a face. Especially not the guilty. Because now I'm part of it. I move through roots. I whisper through leaves. I crawl behind bark and bloom in the fog. And every time someone takes a rock, a flower, a fallen feather, I feel it. I feel it. Like a splinter in my chest. And I send the wind to warn them. But they never listen. They never take the warning. Until it's too late. I remember the last man. Middle-aged. Hiking boots. Expensive gear. He thought he owned the trail. He stepped into the circle like it meant nothing. And he found the box. I watched him from the canopy. Waited. When he opened it, he laughed. Said it was just a stupid old thing. He took it, put it in his pack, and walked away. But the forest closed behind him. Paths disappeared. Birds fell silent. And when night came, he lit a fire. The wrong kind. He burned greenwood. He spit into the flames. And that's when I moved. I called the vines. The roots. The breath of the forest. He screamed, of course. They always do. But no one hears them. Not out here. Not in my forest. I gave him a chance to return it. To kneel. To ask. But he cursed us. So we kept him. And now he's part of the grove. A new tree stands where he fell. Bent. Crooked. Weeping sap every time someone walks by. His shoes are still there. Half swallowed. Side by side with the others. I am the roots beneath your feet. I am the wind through your windows. I am the ache in your chest when you forget how to listen. And I'm not here to haunt you. I'm here to warn you. Because the forest doesn't hate you. It remembers you. And if you treat it with kindness, true, sacred kindness, it may just let you leave. But if you don't, it will call you back. Like it did me. There are places deeper than maps. Spots untouched by satellite, unseen by drone, unknown even to the oldest topographer's hand. Black Hollow is one of them. But it isn't the only one. I know that now. Because the roots speak to each other. Across forests. Across oceans. Through fungus and stone and bone. They whisper stories through the ground like a nervous system made of memory. And I've heard the secrets they keep. Buried beneath redwoods, inside tundra ice, under desert sand. Other guardians like me. Other warnings. We were once men and women. Scientists. Teachers. Hikers. Criminals. Lovers. The ignorant. The curious. The arrogant. All taken. All transformed. All now keepers. We don't speak with mouths. We speak with rustling leaves and curling vines. With sudden cold in the wind. With the cracking of bark when no one's near. And sometimes, if the forest lets you, we show you what came before. I've watched generations pass through these woods. Some respectful. Most not. And each time someone leaves trash, or lights a cigarette, or snaps a branch just for fun, a shadow follows them. Sometimes it stays behind. Sometimes it doesn't. But not all visitors are destroyers. Some come grieving. Some come seeking answers. Some come to bury. Like I did. And for them, the forest chooses mercy. It tests them. Asks a question without words. And if they answer right, with humility, with reverence, the trees let them go. But if they lie? If they pretend to love the earth but only take from it? Then the roots remember. They always remember. There's a grove now, not far from the circle. It didn't exist when I first came here. But it's growing fast. Each tree twisted. Each trunk carved with the faint impression of a face. Not detailed, not anymore, but enough to feel the humanity that once breathed beneath the bark. I walk the grove often. I feel their sorrow. Some scream in silence, begging to be freed. Others have found peace in the stillness. They've become part of the cycle. Of decay. Of life. Of balance. I envy them. Because I am not at peace. I am the warning. The one who must remember every scream, every root broken, every deer slaughtered for sport, every bottle tossed, every sacred patch of moss crushed under boot. I carry it. And when the time comes, I pass it on. You might think this is just a story. A creepy tale told on YouTube. But one day you'll feel it. In the back of your mind. In the silence between bird calls. In the way a tree seems to lean toward you just slightly as you pass by. And you'll ask yourself, did I leave the forest better than I found it? Pray the answer is yes. Because if it's no, we'll meet. And I won't be human when I do. Time doesn't pass here the way it used to. There's no day. No night. Just seasons. I feel them like emotions now, not temperatures or colors. Spring is hunger. Summer is joy. Fall is grief. And winter is death. But I don't die. I change. Each cycle strips something away from me. First, it was my voice. Then, my dreams. Now, my memories. I've started to forget things I thought I'd hold onto forever. My mother's face. The sound of Daisy's bark. The smell of coffee in the morning. Even my name, Ethan, it feels like a word in a language I no longer speak. The trees don't call me that. They call me something older. A sound made of rustling and wind and creaking wood. Not a name. A purpose. And I understand now that's what I've become. Not a person. Not a soul. A purpose. A living answer to a question the earth keeps asking. What happens when man forgets his roots? Sometimes new life sprouts near my feet. Little buds. Tiny ferns. They wrap around my legs, my arms, my spine. They cling like children. They listen. And I teach them. I teach them pain. Loss. Fire. Chainsaws. Smoke. Oil in the water. Plastic in the soil. I don't speak with words. I show them. And I watch their little leaves tremble. But I also show them something else. The moment a human kneels. Not in fear, but in awe. I show them when hands plant, not tear. When voices sing, not scream. When someone walks into a forest and asks permission. And the forest says yes. That's the part one cling to. The only piece of humanity I haven't surrendered. Hope. It's faint. Like a dying ember. But it's still here. Buried beneath layers of bark and memory. Rooted so deep even the oldest trees don't touch it. I know someone else is coming soon. I can feel it in the way the soil tightens. And how the birds hold their breath. Another human. Drawn to Black Hollow. Not by accident. Never by accident. The forest chooses who it calls. And this one. This one feels different. Not afraid. Not angry. Just empty. Searching. I wonder what they'll find. I wonder if I'll be the voice they hear in the leaves. I wonder if I'll be gentle. Or if I'll have to remind them why the ground still screams. I hope they bring seeds. I hope they bring silence. I hope they don't dig. But if they do, they'll see the spiral. And I'll be waiting. She stepped into the forest just after dawn. Alone. No phone. No music. No noise. She wore a canvas jacket and boots that had seen years of dirt. Her pack was light. Her hands steady. And in one of them she held a small metal trowel. Not a shovel. Not a blade. Just something for planting. And I knew immediately she was not like the others. She knelt by the stream. She drank from it. Didn't treat it like a threat or worse, like a utility. She whispered something. Not to the stream. To the stones. And when she placed her fingers into the soil, she did it like she was asking permission first. The forest sighed. Long. Low. Like old lungs remembering breath. I watched from the canopy, wrapped in bark and silence. Something inside me stirred. Not hunger. Not warning. Something I hadn't felt in decades. Curiosity. Who was she? Why had she come? There was no grave to dig. No dog to bury. No ashes to scatter. And yet she carried with her a small box. But not the box. This one wasn't rusted. It wasn't cursed. It was carved. Handmade. She opened it slowly. Inside were seeds. Wrapped in paper soaked in rainwater and time. And a note. I leaned closer through the wind. The paper read. From the last garden my mother ever touched. She looked around. Chose a spot. Not near the circle. Not near the grove. Somewhere new. Unclaimed. And she dug. Gentle. Patient. Quiet. With every scoop of dirt, the trees leaned in. Not to trap her. To witness her. She planted the seeds. All 12. Then she pressed the soil back like a blessing. And whispered, grow. Even if I don't. I almost showed myself then. Stepped out from the bark. Let her see what I become. Let her know the forest still remembers kindness. But I didn't. Because she already knew. She stood up. Looked straight into the trees at me, though she couldn't see me. And she said, I know you're here. Her voice didn't tremble. It sang. You've been waiting for someone to listen. I'm listening now. She smiled. Then she turned and walked back the way she came. The forest opened for her. Like a hand parting a curtain. And for the first time in decades it let someone leave freely. No tests. No whispers. Just wind behind her, not pushing, but thanking. Hours later, the seeds broke soil. Small sprouts. Green is forgiveness. And I wept. Sap tears down a face of bark. Because maybe. Just maybe. Not all who come to the forest are thieves. Some come to give back. Some come to remind us what it means to be human. It began the next morning. Soft. Barely a sound. A breath more than a voice. But I heard it. Because I'm woven into the soil now. Into the roots. The wind may carry words, but I carry meaning. And the new sprouts? They were speaking. Not in human language. In life language. The way seeds dream before they open. The way leaves tremble before rain. The way roots decide where to grow. They were whispering something old. Something true. And I felt it pulse through the forest like a second heartbeat. We remember her. Spread. Not just in the clearing where she planted them, but everywhere. Moss thickened on tree trunks. Flowers bloomed where none had bloomed in years. Birdsong returned to silent branches. Even the ground felt warmer, like the forest was exhaling, releasing a breath it had been holding for centuries. And me? I stood at the edge of her garden, watching, wanting to kneel, to reach out, to touch life again. But I didn't, because I knew my place. I wasn't a gardener. I was the scar that reminded the forest to heal. Still, something inside me shifted. The bark on my arm cracked open. And beneath it, skin, pale, soft, mine, Ethan's. It stunned me. I hadn't seen that name in so long. It felt like reading a stranger's obituary. But the forest was showing me something. A choice. A door cracked open. And then I heard a sound I never thought I'd hear again. Laughter. Children. Far off. Through the trees. Real? Or memory? I didn't know. But it called to me. And I moved toward it. As I walked, I passed the old grove, the one filled with trees that used to be men. I expected their branches to creak in warning, to groan with sorrow. But they didn't. They were quiet. Still. Like they were listening. And at the far edge of the grove, one tree stood out. Newer. Smaller. But its bark was darker. Its roots deeper. And carved into its side, almost invisible, was a single letter. E. I reached out and touched it. And for a second, the wind called my name. Not the forest name. Not the one made of cracking wood and breath. But my real name. Ethan. Gentle. Human. Alive. Maybe I'm not lost. Not completely. Maybe what that girl planted wasn't just seeds. Maybe she planted hope. And maybe hope grows faster than rot. I stayed by that tree for hours. Maybe days. Time slips when your blood runs with sap. But something had changed. The forest wasn't pulling me anymore. It was waiting. Watching. Like an old friend who doesn't know if they're forgiven yet. And I didn't know what to do. The bark on my arms remained. My legs still rooted when I stood still too long. But my chest, right over the spiral scar, it pulsed with something different. Like a second heart. One that beat to her rhythm. The girl with the trowel. The seeds. The silence. She'd planted more than life into the ground. She'd planted a choice. That night I dreamed of fire. But not the devouring kind. Not the one that turns forests to ash and air to poison. This fire was clean. Centered in the stone circle. Burning blue like the first time. But now it pulsed calmly, almost kindly. And in its light, I saw them. The ones who came before me. The guardians. The forgotten. The ones who became warnings. They stood in a ring, bark for skin, vines for veins, moss where hair once grew. And all of them stared at me. But not with judgment. With something closer to recognition. Like they saw I wasn't like them anymore. Not entirely. I wasn't just the scar. I was the choice. The middle. The question mark. And then one of them stepped forward. A woman. Tall. Half ash. Half tree. Her eyes held centuries. She placed her hand on my chest. Right where the spiral had always burned. And she said, not with her mouth, but with her roots. You can leave now. But you'll always carry the grove. I woke up gasping. Not in the woods. Not in the grove. In a cabin. A different one. Clean. Warm. Human. My old clothes folded on a chair. A small fire crackling in the hearth. The bark on my arms? Gone. Just skin. Real. Mine. I stood slowly. Carefully. Half expecting to crumble like an old log. But I didn't. I moved. Freely. And when I stepped outside, the sky above Black Hollow was clear. No fog. No whispering wind. Just light filtering through the trees. Soft, golden, forgiving. The forest had let me go, but not without leaving a piece behind. Because under my skin, deep and hidden, I could still feel it. The roots, not binding me, but connecting me to every tree, every whisper, every choice. And in the distance, barely audible through the birdsong, I heard her voice again. The girl's, softer now, but certain. Grow, even if I don't. And I knew then that even though I was free, I would never stop listening. I left Black Hollow that day. Or maybe I should say it let me go. There was no ceremony, no thunder, no voice echoing from the roots. Just a path, clear, soft with pine needles, and a silence so deep it didn't feel empty. It felt whole. When I reached the edge of the forest, I turned back one last time. It didn't wave goodbye, but I could feel it, watching, not as a threat, not as a prison, but as something ancient that had finally exhaled. The town at the edge of the woods hadn't changed. Same cracked sidewalks, same dusty diner. But to me it looked like another planet. So many people, so much noise, so many distractions from the kind of silence I had grown used to. I walked into a gas station to grab water. The fluorescent lights made my skin itch. The clerk didn't even look up, just rang me up and grunted, "Anything else?" I opened my mouth to say no, but something else came out. "Do you have seeds?" He blinked. "Like sunflower? Or any kind?" He pointed to a dusty rack near the back. I bought every packet. Didn't know why at the time, but I couldn't leave without them. It felt like carrying someone else's children across a border. I didn't go back to my apartment. That place wasn't mine anymore. The forest had erased it from me. Instead, I drove. For days. No GPS. No plan. Just listening to the wind through the cracked windows of my truck. And when I found a place that felt right, I stopped. A small patch of land on a hill. Forgotten. Overgrown. Untouched. And I started to dig. Not deep. Just enough to plant. Not one seed, but all of them. Sunflowers. Lavender. Basil. Even wild grass. I pressed them into the soil with my bare hands. And I whispered, "Grow. Even if I don't." Just like she had. People started coming. Not crowds. Not tourists. Just seekers. Some lost. Some grieving. Some simply tired of the weight modern life put on their shoulders. They found my garden by accident. Or maybe not. Maybe the roots had started whispering again. And I listened. I always listened. I taught them how to plant, how to kneel, how to listen without needing to speak. And over time, something incredible happened. The land changed. It started remembering. Birds returned. Soil softened. Even the air smelled different. Like forgiveness. Like second chances. And me? I never went back to the man I used to be. Because you don't walk out of a forest like Black Hollow. You carry it inside you. Forever. And when the wind howls through the trees on cold nights, when it calls a name that no one else hears, I wake up. And I whisper back. I'm still listening. Years passed. Seasons turned like pages in a book written by something older than language. My hair grayed. My hands calloused. But the land grew. And with it I did too, not as Ethan Caldwell, not as the one who ran from his past, but as a man who belonged to something again. I'd almost forgotten her face. The girl with the trowel. The one who whispered to the soil and walked away with the forest's blessing. But she returned. Just before the first frost of October. I was tending the lavender, bent over the beds when I felt it, a silence settle around me. Not empty. Reverent. I turned. And there she was. Older now? Like me. But the same eyes. The same quiet fire. She walked the path without making a sound. Like the earth remembered her feet. We didn't speak right away. Didn't need to. She knelt beside me and ran her hand through the soil. Smiled. Then said, "You kept it alive." I nodded, heart hammering like it hadn't in years. "You saved me," I whispered. "You changed everything." Her gaze dropped to the garden. "No," she said. "You chose. I only planted." We sat in silence for a long time. And then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out another box. Wooden. Hand-carved. But this one was smaller. She opened it. Inside a single acorn. Polished. Shining. "I found this the day I left the forest," she said. "It was lying on the road. Just sitting there." I held it like a relic. It pulsed with warmth. Life. Possibility. She nodded toward the edge of the garden. "You'll know where to put it." And she was right. I walked to the center of the grove, a newer one, built over years of patience, of sweat, of reverent planting. I dug with my hands. The soil welcomed me like a handshake. And I placed the acorn in the earth. Softly. Deliberately. Then covered it, pressed the dirt down, and whispered, "Grow. Even if I don't." And something in the air shifted. The trees rustled, though there was no wind. Birds rose into the sky. The sun, just for a second, broke through the clouds. It was like the entire world took a breath. And let it out. She stayed until dusk. Then she stood, brushed off her hands, and looked at me one last time. "Some places need pain to heal," she said. "But it doesn't have to be yours anymore." I didn't ask where she was going, because I knew. The forest was calling her again. But not to take. To teach. And I knew there were more like me out there, people on the edge of forgetting what it means to belong to the earth. And they'd need her. Just like I did. She walked into the tree line. And vanished. No sound. No trail. Just the faintest whisper left behind. Like a root brushing your ankle. Like a leaf falling from nowhere. Like a reminder. We are not above nature. We are part of it. And when we forget that, the forest remembers for us. I don't know when it happened exactly. It wasn't one moment. It was hundreds. Thousands. A slow shedding of self, like leaves falling, one by one, until only the core remained. And what remained wasn't quite me anymore. But it wasn't the forest either. It was something between. A bridge. A thread. A keeper. I stopped aging. Or maybe I just stopped counting. The mirror in the garden shed cracked one winter, and I never bothered to replace it. Didn't need it. I could see myself in the bark of every tree, in the curve of every vine, in the eyes of every fox that lingered a second too long before vanishing back into the brush. People still came. More than before. Something about the place called to them. They'd arrive looking for peace, or answers, or an escape they didn't know they needed. Some came angry. Some came grieving. Some came empty. And the land responded. Sometimes gently. Sometimes not. I didn't control it. I was just part of the current now. But I always knew. When someone walked the path with good in their heart, no matter how buried, the garden would bloom a little brighter. And when someone lied to the land, took without asking, the wind would rise. The soil would harden. And I would feel it in my bones like a warning bell. One spring a child arrived. 7, maybe 8. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. She walked straight to the center of the garden, the spot where I planted the acorn. By then it was no longer a seed. It was a tree. Tall. Wide. Spiraled with symbols I hadn't carved. They'd grown naturally. From memory. From magic. From meaning. The girl placed her small hand on the trunk and closed her eyes. She stayed like that for hours. And I wept without knowing why. Later, I found her asleep by the roots, curled up like she'd returned to the safest place on earth. And for the first time in years, I spoke out loud. Thank you. To the forest. To her. To everything. And I felt it answer back. In the breeze. In the warmth beneath my feet. In the pulse that had once been mine, now shared by everything living. I wasn't just listening anymore. I was being heard. I don't sleep now. Not in the way you'd recognize. I rest in cycles. In blooms. In frost. And sometimes in the stillness between raindrops. When the air smells like green and the ground hums with life. I am always awake somewhere. In the petals. In the bark. In the breath between roots. And if someone kneels beside my garden and presses their hands into the dirt with love, they'll feel it. A heartbeat. Slow. Strong. Unshakable. Mine. The forest's. Ours. There is no end to the story. Only return. Because the forest isn't just trees. It isn't moss or bark or vines that twist around forgotten boots. It's memory. It's the weight of every footstep that forgot to tread lightly. It's the echo of every laugh that honored the silence. It's the scream of the first tree ever cut, and the sigh of the first seed ever planted with love. I know this now, because I've become it. Fully. Finally. Completely. They buried someone here last spring. A man. Older. Quiet. Kind. He'd been sick. Said he wanted to spend his last days where things still made sense. I watched as they dug gently. No machines. Only hands. Only care. They placed him beneath the acorn tree. Now massive. A canopy of peace. And as the soil was pressed over him, the wind picked up. The leaves sang. The garden bloomed, all of it at once. And a single vine slithered down the tree's trunk. Wrapped around the grave. Not to bind it. To hold it. Like a mother holds a child she never wanted to let go. I don't walk anymore. There's no need. I am the walk. The path itself. The breath between birdsong. The hush before thunder. Sometimes when someone new comes and steps through the gate, they stop suddenly and say, "It feels like someone's watching." They're right. I am. But not as a warning. As a witness. Because what you do next, how you treat this place, how you touch the soil, how you listen, that tells me everything. It tells me if you're still lost. Or if maybe, just maybe, you've started to come home. So here it is. Your story. Your invitation. When the wind calls your name in the trees, will you answer? When the ground beneath your feet pulses with memory, will you listen? And when you stand before the forest, will you walk in with fire? Or with seeds? Because the forest never dies. It only waits. And remembers. And when you forget who you are, it will remind you. One way. Or another.